Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday. Oh! Excuse me. I didn't hear you come in. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bonser of Radio Retro Future. I apologize for the bit of a dreary atmosphere today. I recently had my first year anniversary. Drink to that. So, for today, I was looking up old friends, and I decided to read a little article by Eric Fisk, my good friend from the Fedora Chronicles, who has been on my show and the Anachronistic Society several times now. So, when I respond to this article, this is no way with any hard feelings. I just feel like talking about Requiem for Steampunk by Eric Fisk of the Fedora Chronicles. Now, so earlier this month, Eric Fisk wrote a little article called Requiem for Steampunk. Nice tombstones, by the way, Eric. Appreciate it. Now, before I go on, I would say I agree with about 80% on the content of this article. It's not really the facts that he's stating that I have issues with. If you're interested in this topic, what my take on it, please have a look at my video called Steampunk Does Not Exist. Now, with no further delay, let's get to Requiem for Steampunk. My issues with this particular article are right at the beginning, where Eric declares steampunk to be a rotting husk, clinging to social media for life support. Now, if steampunk indeed is a husk, it's like a lich that refuses to stay dead, and keep conjuring up of the living dead, like dieselpunk and other punks that I prefer to remain in their caskets, where I cannot see them. Now, if you think I'm harsh on these derivatives, Eric refers to these retro-futuristic spin-offs as fungi that use steampunk's corpse as their fertilizer. Speaking of metaphors, what Eric attempts to demonstrate here is that all these retro-futuristic whatever punks follow in the wake of its flagship, steampunk, and if that flagship disappears into the mists, all others will soon lose their way and sink into the sea of nothingness that includes Eric's own little dreadnought called Dieselpunk. Why he would lament the loss of steampunk, because in the end steampunk and all these others have nothing on steampunk when it comes down to name recognition. Now, Eric also points out that steampunks have been calling anything they like steampunk, without any form of consistency. As a result, the word has lost any meaningful value, because everything is steampunk, anything can be steampunk. What does it mean when you call something steampunk, right? However, then he goes out with something I find rather objectionable, and he talks about that the only true steampunk is the hashtag everyday steampunk crowd, whoever they are, and how only people that practice it every day can be hashtag true steampunks, and people that only appear as these hashtag fair weather steampunks on conventions are posers. I find this rather objectionable for two reasons. One of them is that some people don't have the luxury, for whatever reason, to do steampunk every day. And two, because it ignores all the time and effort people put into their costumes with the limited time and resources they have at their disposal. And two, because it ignores all the time and effort people put in their costumes with the little time and resources they have at their disposal to get their costumes ready in time for the con. Mind you that some of these people save up money a year in advance to get their tickets and be able to have a good time at those cons. Also, he ignores the people that support the more dedicated creators among us, like myself, with whatever means they can, be it with just time by sharing their articles on social media, or supporting people like me on Patreon or some other crowdfunding platform. Now, what does it mean anyway? Was steampunk supposed to mean anything to begin with? Well, before we delve into that, what does it mean to be dead? The only example I can think of is the Latin language that got backstabbed in the Renaissance. Back then we had some elitists that were of the opinion that the Latin they spoke in the Middle Ages was somehow wrong, because it wasn't like that of Cicero. So they had to get back to the source, in other words, Cicero's Latin, because they happened to like Cicero. But in truth, these morons had no idea how languages work, nor did they realize languages change all the time. A son can have a completely different way of speaking than his father. Just look at all the dialects within your own country. No, for some reason they thought it was a good idea to have only one and never changing Latin. And I think that many of my professors kept lamenting during their courses. The question is this what Eric is implying when he talks about steampunk is dead? Now, I have said similar things like steampunk does not exist, but this is not what I meant. And Eric's statements are false when you take all those darn nasty exceptions into account. The fact that my style is very different from your typical Victorian steampunk is the reason I have a small but rather loyal fanbase to begin with. And then take creators like Brian Oliver, Paulo Valerga, and Barry Kirsch. They innovate, and those are just some people that are part of the community. Outside it, there's also a lot of stuff happening, but steampunks don't pay that much attention to it because these projects lack the social opportunities that steampunks want, but more on that another time. First thing we need to talk about is, what does the term steampunk refer to? Three things that are related but should not be confused. The science fiction genre, the visual style, and of course the subculture or community. And maybe you could add identity, but in the context of Eric's article, we mainly talk about the community and how it does not conform to his interpretation of the word punk in steampunk, where he states where the punk in steampunk does not mean anything. That's why it could better be dropped. Now, I already stated I am not a big fan of the term steampunk either, but let's talk about its origins. Because the thing is that the word steampunk was not supposed to mean anything to begin with. It was a wordplay on the term cyberpunk, which had some inspiration in the punk movement. However, the idea that steampunk should be like the punks of back when sounds rather unrealistic to me. The punks are a counterculture that erupted during the 70s, like Eric explained. It was fueled by the culture and politics of the Cold War, and that they were not gonna take it. That's why punks practically disappeared, when they had nothing to rally against. Also, to add some nuance, what people often forget about the older generations that the punks rallied against was one that lived through the Second World War, either living under oppression, bombardment, or facing enemy guns in Normandy. But let's carry on. Steampunks get their inspiration from like 200 years of pop culture, including the influence of punk and similar movements. But punks were against, well, pretty much anything, while steampunks want to stand for something. If steampunks are punks, it means they would reject the mindset of the original punks. Like, art is dead, or history is bunk and only supports traditional values, or hate the machine. Okay, you already imagine, like, the old rituals the punks had will be introduced. like Xerxes Horde or John Sprocket of the Steampunk Dead whipping out their dicks in public and piss literally over their audience, you know, like the Sex Pistols did. How hilarious that might seem. I don't think a lady in a corset is eager to have their bosoms pissed on by whoever. But if these ladies do, I'm not judging. And even that is a romanticized version of punk. Punk originally came from a class-conscious UK. By the time it became popular on the mainland, young people didn't even understand that. They learned it all through music. They didn't understand the social environment where these bands came from. When I was young, my sister was a punker. You know, she had the scarves and the multicolored hair and stuff. She was a big fan of a Dutch punk band called Doemar. Actually, they're still pretty popular, by the way. They just don't do much together anymore. Anyway, all of her friends came at our place. You know, they wore the leather jackets and giant mohawks, rats in the neck. Her home was pretty much punk central. I didn't understand it, but I don't think they did either. I mean, many of them were like well-mannered teens who were, you know, from well-to-do families, you know, who just like to do stuff together, listen to the music, and get drunk. Sure, they had political inclinations, you know, joint protests and stuff, but I don't think they are the hardcore anarchists that many paint them to be. Like, their acts of rebellion were like, hey guys, I peed against the door of City Hall. Isn't that edgy? You know, that kind of stuff. You know, if you're listening, you know who you are, by the way. So, anyway, case in point, punks had the same issues back then as steampunks have now. So, to address Eric's proposal that steampunk needs a name change or drop the word punk wouldn't solve anything. Because it only begs the question again, well, what is a punk, doesn't it? If steampunk would have to live up to that name, does that mean Montague Jacques Fromage would have to drop his pants on stage and piss over his audience? You tell me! Now I need to leech the pressure to my mind. Thanks for that. Anyway, I could go on about this subject, but the video is long enough as it is, so I'll address the punk aspect of steampunk some other time in depth. But I do want to address this big difference. Punk wasn't a name that punks gave themselves. As for what I can make out, originally it meant young criminal or youngster with criminal tendencies, and I'm sure they were a very common sight in the working class areas of cities like London and Manchester. And probably they were a stereotype. So when these youngsters started to rebel, they reappropriated the name, as countercultures often do. And it worked. It worked too well, maybe. The term became synonymous with all the protests during the Cold War era and became part of pop culture. That's when people like Sterling and Gibson started with these doomsday scenarios in their fiction. They adopted the name cyberpunk because it reflected many of the fears that people like the punks had in those days. I don't hear anyone talk about how people that identify with cyberpunk should fight the system. And I doubt we'll ever hear them scream like, stop technology and stop advancement. These people are not Luddites, although the names would suggest they should be. All the cyberpunks I know are really pro-technology, with a fair amount of skepticism. Both cyber and steampunks want their imaginary world to come true. Unlike punks who wanted things to basically end. Get it over with. Let the bombs drop. The band Doemar actually had that as one of their lyrics. Unfortunately, it's Dutch, so it wouldn't really matter, but my point is that punk and steampunk have completely different context to them. And punk, as it existed way back, will never live again. You know, unless Trump manages to echo the new Cold War, but until then, it will never happen. You see, unlike punk, steampunk does have a future. It already outlived punk by a great margin. And it ain't gonna go anywhere as long as people keep innovating. And I believe this is partly what Eric is trying to say. Lack of innovation. And I disagree. But I can't say he's wrong. I've already expressed many similar concerns in past videos. So, please watch more of those if you're interested. to see what Eric is talking about. But what he failed to do, Eric, was to describe what's lacking. And that's the same what killed the punk movement. It nearly paralyzed the goth movement in the Netherlands. That's lack of vision. What steampunk and all other genres, not just the steampunk derivatives, but goth and all those, they need thought leaders. And more importantly, people need to support those thought leaders. You know, spread these ideas. I'm not talking about one person saying, this is what steampunk should be. No. I'm just talking about people that bring innovative ideas. This is what we can do. This is the potential we have. Let's do something with it. Promote how steampunk can be used for education. Promote how steampunk can be used for entertainment. You see how steampunk can be used to educate people in technology or scientific fields. All that stuff. That's what I'm talking about. We should stop the discussion, ooh, what's steampunk? No, that's not just beating a dead horse. I'm so tired of these discussions. Ooh, is this steampunk? No, shut up. Not interesting. Nobody wants to hear that. Let steampunk inspire you to do great things. That's it. That's what you should be aiming for. And if you need thought leaders to inspire you to do that, promote them. Share their videos, share their blogs, share their work, share their pictures. Look at this, look at these people, look what they can do. Maybe we can help them or support them or spread their ideas. It's one thing to say things are not going the way you want. It's a whole other thing to actually do something about it. People think that steampunk is dying or lacking innovation or the focus is on the wrong things. Well, fine. Then let's come up with ideas how to fix it. Let's stop talking about what steampunk is and let's talk about what steampunk could be. And I believe there's great potential. I wouldn't be doing all this effort. I wouldn't be putting my opinions on the internet if I didn't believe that. Now that's what I had to say on the topic. If you like what I had to say, please like and share this video, subscribe if you haven't already, all that jazz, and of course, make it good way and good night. Why are you still watching? Fuck off out of my house. Come on. Scram!